They told me to leave my own living room. So I did something they didn't expect. Have you ever been asked to leave your own living room? Not for a renovation. Not because something broke or flooded or caught fire. No, I mean really asked. As in, "You're making him uncomfortable, Mom. Can you go to your room?" Because that's what my daughter said to me. And it wasn't a joke. It wasn't even said with anger. It was worse, she said it like it was the most reasonable sentence in the world. Like it made perfect sense that a 74-year-old woman, the one who had paid off the mortgage of this house with years of night shifts, leftover casseroles and prayers set into threadbare pillowcases, should just remove herself from her own living room. Because her daughter's new husband, the one with the soft hands, the man who can't stand the smell of garlic or the sound of Jeopardy on volume 12, found me a bit much, and I said nothing. I walked out of that room and into the hallway, like I was the hired help. Like I hadn't nursed that child with cracked nipples and a broken marriage. Like I hadn't held this house up with both hands and refused to let it fall apart after her father died. I closed the bedroom door behind me, turned the little lock even though I hadn't used it in decades, and sat on the edge of the bed like a girl waiting to be scolded. My fingers were cold. My ears burned. The hallway clock ticked loud enough to measure my humiliation in seconds. She didn't even look back when she said it. Melissa. My only child. My only anything really since Henry passed. She stood in the kitchen with her arms folded, whispering to Travis, like they were talking about a leaky faucet and not a living, breathing woman with thinning hair and bones that had outlasted 3 recessions. "You're making him uncomfortable." That's what I was now. An uneasy presence. In the house I'd made safe for her all those years ago. And I don't think she even realized what she'd said. That was the cruelest part. She said it casually, like you'd say we're out of milk or the mail didn't come today. There was no malice, no venom, just dismissal. I used to think the worst kind of betrayal would feel like a knife. Sharp, immediate. But it doesn't. It feels like this. A door closing softly behind you. A voice that doesn't rise because it doesn't need to. It already assumes you'll comply. It feels like silence, long, tight, and full of things no one wants to say out loud. I sat on my bed, still wearing the cardigan I'd ironed that morning, the one with the little white buttons. I'd put it on because Melissa said Travis was particular about people looking put together, as if my flannel robe would offend his allergies. So I'd combed my hair, worn, the cardigan, put on the soft socks with the non-slip bottoms. And still, I was too much. That night, I didn't eat dinner. Not because anyone told me I couldn't, but because I couldn't stand the idea of walking back out into that kitchen, of seeing my daughter laugh at a joke I didn't hear, of smelling that strange spray Travis uses to neutralize odors like basil and bleach, had a child, and named it domination. So I stayed in the bedroom, ate a granola bar I'd stashed in my drawer last winter, sipped lukewarm water from a ceramic mug that still had Henry's name written on the bottom in faded marker, and I listened. Through the door. Travis was talking about some article he read. Melissa was humming in agreement. And then came the words that pushed me over a line I didn't even know was there. "She'll adjust," he said. "And Melissa." She replied, "Eventually, or she won't," like I was a couch they didn't like the color of. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I laid on top of the covers fully dressed with the lamp on like some kind of motel guest too polite to ask for a blanket. My hands wouldn't stay still. They kept picking at the hem of my sleeve like it held answers. Somewhere around 2:30 a.m., I heard the refrigerator door open and close, the hush of whispers, laughter, his voice. Travis low and smug like someone who thinks he's won something, and maybe he had. By breakfast, the house had already shifted. The radio station in the kitchen was changed, gone was the soft classical I listened to with my coffee. Now it was some hollow jazz remix station. Travis liked the kind with synthetic drums and no soul. The dish towels had been replaced too. Mine were embroidered little violets and bluebirds stitched by hand years ago. Now there were plain gray ones that looked like they belonged in a waiting room. Melissa acted like nothing had happened. She asked if I wanted oat milk in my tea. Oat milk. I said I was fine. Travis came in wearing slippers I didn't recognize and took the last slice of toast before I could reach for it. He said, "Morning," but didn't wait for an answer. Just sat down and pulled out his laptop, like the kitchen belonged to him, like I was visiting. I poured my tea, stood by the window, and watched the bird feeder sway in the wind. The Finches hadn't come this week. Maybe they sensed it too, that something in the air had turned sour. "Big day today," Travis said to Melissa, grinning. "That open house at 11, the one with the granite countertops." Melissa lit up like someone had flipped a switch inside her. "Oh, that's right," she said. "We'll be out most of the afternoon, Mom. You'll have the place to yourself. The place to myself. My home. My table. My kitchen." And still, they said it like they were lending me something. After they left, I sat down in the living room, the one I'd been told not to disturb the night before, and looked around. The photos were gone. The little clock Henry had bought on our 20th anniversary had been moved. There was a new throw blanket on the couch, scratchy and beige, covering the floral print I'd chosen 3 decades ago because it reminded me of spring. And there it was, sitting smug on the coffee table. A candle. Sandalwood and musk. One of his. I leaned forward, lit it out of spite, then immediately regretted it. The smell filled the room like arrogance. I opened the window to let it out. That's when I saw it. His shoes. 3 pairs lined up by the front door. Perfectly placed. Like he was marking territory. I don't know what happened in that moment. Maybe it was the smell of that candle. Maybe it was the way Melissa had said, "You'll have the place to yourself," like she was doing me a favor. Or maybe it was just the quiet. The kind that presses on your chest when you've been ignored for too long. I got up, went to the hall closet and pulled out a small notebook I hadn't used in years, the one with grocery lists and Henry's old chili recipe written in the back. I flipped to a fresh page and wrote at the top, "Things that are no longer mine." And I began. My chair in the sunroom, the corner cabinet in the kitchen, the volume on the TV, the smell of garlic, the freedom to sit down without asking who needs the space first. By the time I stopped, I'd filled 2 pages. I closed the notebook gently like it might bruise if I moved too fast. Then I stood in the middle of my living room and listened. Not for sounds, but for what was missing. And I realized it wasn't the house that had changed. It was me. I'd made myself smaller, quieter, more agreeable. I'd stepped aside, stepped back, stepped down until I barely recognized the woman who used to hum while dusting the picture frames, who played piano on Saturday mornings, who wore lipstick just to feel like herself. I was still here, but I had let them shrink me. and I was done. Do you know what it feels like to reclaim something so slowly, so quietly, that no one notices at first, not even you? It starts with one drawer. I opened the sideboard in the dining room that morning and found Travis's Bluetooth speaker nestled next to the silverware I only use for holidays. I don't know how long it had been there. Maybe since they first moved in. Maybe longer. I unplugged it, set it in a box. That box sat by the hallway mirror, out of sight, but not forgotten. Later, I added Melissa's kombucha kit, the one she never used but insisted should stay somewhere central. Then the set of mugs with sarcastic slogans that never made me laugh. Then the air purifier Travis said was essential, but just made everything smell like cold menthol. I didn't throw anything out, not yet. I just moved them out of circulation, out of my rhythm. And maybe you've done this too, not to punish, not to fight, but to breathe again. The second thing I reclaimed was the hallway light. They had installed a dimmer. Softer for the evenings, Travis said. But I like light. Warm, honest light. So I unscrewed his special bulbs and put back the ones that hummed softly and lit the frames on the wall, the ones of Henry in his garden hat. Melissa in, braces me on the porch swing with lemonade and a smirk. When Melissa came home that night, she said nothing, just paused a moment, then walked past the mirror where she used to check her lipstick every morning. She doesn't wear lipstick anymore. Travis says it's too much. I made spaghetti that evening, the kind with extra garlic, just the way Henry used to like it. Travis poked at it and said, "Smells strong." I smiled. That's how you know it's good. He didn't finish his plate. I didn't apologize. Later, as I folded laundry in the sunroom, I reached for a stack of hand towels and realized half of them weren't mine. They were beige, bland, machine-made. I tucked them into the box too. That's the thing about taking back your space. It's not about kicking people out. It's about inviting yourself back in. And I wonder, have you ever had to do that? Have you ever tiptoed around your own furniture only to realize you were the one who disappeared? The next morning, I woke up early before the coffee maker hissed, before Travis started his daily podcast in that monotone voice that made every subject sound like a funeral. And I did something small. I pulled out my recipe book. The red one with the frayed spine, the one I used to write in back when Melissa was in middle school, and Henry still read the newspaper front to back. I flipped through the pages, past notes in my handwriting, little comments like, "Henry likes this with extra pepper, and Melissa didn't touch this one, maybe too much onion." I landed on a page labeled Sunday bread, and I baked. The smell filled the house. It crept into the hallway, into the stairs, into the very wood of the place. When Travis came down, he blinked like someone who'd walked into the wrong memory. "What's that smell?" he asked. "Home," I said. "Let me ask you something. What smell brings you back to yourself?" For me, it's yeast and rosemary and butter. Nothing fancy. Just honest. That same afternoon, I went to the garage. I hadn't stepped foot in there properly since they moved in. I used to keep it organized, Henry's tools on one wall, the gardening bins on the other. It had rhythm like a good pantry. Now, chaos. Travis had boxes everywhere, labeled things like old tech camping gear, and I kid you not, one that simply said, "important male stuff." I stood in the middle of it all and whispered to myself, "No more." I started with one shelf. Just one. Cleared off the clutter. Wiped the dust. Lined up the gardening tools in the order I used to know by heart. And you know what I realized? It wasn't about making the garage functional again. It was about remembering I had the right to touch this space, to shape it. That night, I slept with the window open. The air was cool and a little damp, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was holding my breath. And maybe this sounds silly, but I even played piano the next morning. Only one song. Only one verse. My fingers were stiff and the keys sounded a little off, but I played it anyway. Moon River, the one Henry always asked for on Sundays. Melissa came in halfway through and just watched. I didn't stop. When I finished, I stood up, stretched, and said, "This is still my house, Melissa." She looked startled, like someone hearing thunder on a clear day. I didn't wait for her response. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and thought, when did I stop moving like I belonged here? Have you ever felt like a ghost in your own home? Not because anyone screamed at you, but because they slowly erased the things that made you. Do you know when a rebellion starts? It doesn't always look like fists in the air or doors slamming shut. Sometimes it looks like a woman folding up a scented candle and putting it gently in a box she didn't label. Sometimes it's the silence after you say no and don't explain why. For me, it began with the mail. Travis had been receiving catalogs, expensive ones for smart home systems and modular furniture that looked like it belonged in a spaceship. Every week, a new glossy promise of minimalism and masculine lighting. I gathered them, all walked out to the recycle bin, and dropped them in. Every single one. Then I walked back in and brewed my coffee the way I like it. Not the lukewarm pour-over Travis makes with his digital scale and condescending smile. And I didn't ask anyone if they wanted a cup. Let me ask you something. When's the last time you stopped asking for permission in your own life? Later that day, I cleaned the hallway mirror. It wasn't dirty, not really. But I wanted to see myself again. Clearly, fully. And when I did, I looked older than I remembered. But also steadier. Like someone who'd walked through storms and finally stopped wiping the windows for people who never said thank you. I moved my Sunday shoes back by the front door. They had been buried in the back of the coat closet behind Travis's loafers and some hiking boots I'd never seen touch actual mud. When Melissa saw them, she tilted her head and said, "Going somewhere." "No," I said, "just making space again." She didn't reply, just looked down, then walked off. Barefoot, silent. That evening, I set the table for one, not because no one else was home, but because no one else had asked if I wanted company. The plates were the ones from our 25th anniversary, white with blue rims, a little chipped, but still proud. I made lentil soup. Nothing fancy. Nothing filtered for someone else's comfort. And when I sat down, I whispered just loud enough for the walls to remember I'm still here. The next sign came quietly. Travis's gym bag appeared in the hallway. Open. Deliberate. Blocking the path just enough to feel like a message. Melissa didn't mention it. She passed by it twice. Stepped over it the third time. I waited. 1 hour, then 2. And then I picked it up gently, carefully, and placed it in the garage on top of the box labeled "Important Mail Stuff." Didn't say a word. It's funny. When you stop reacting, people don't know what to do with themselves. 2 days later, the bookshelf in the living room shifted. Not physically, but spiritually. I rearranged it, pulled out the books that mattered to me. The ones Henry used to underline, the poetry I loved, the cookbooks I never stopped using. I moved the tech manuals and finance jargon and self-help books about winning space to the bottom shelf where the dust is honest. Then I added something small, a framed photo. Me at 23 standing in front of the greenhouse I built with my father. No filters, no edits, just dirt under my nails and joy in my eyes. That photo hadn't been displayed in years. I think I'd forgotten that version of myself. Melissa noticed it the next morning. She paused, really paused. "Where was this taken?" she asked. "Before you," I said not unkindly. She didn't smile, but she didn't move it either. That was the shift. I began taking walks again, long ones, without announcing where I was going. I started wearing my earrings again, not the little studs, but the silver hoops Henry used to call my battle flags. And I reclaimed the piano, not to play for others, just to touch the keys. The final act came when I went to the linen closet and found his towels, the gray ones, stiff and heavy and smug. I folded them neatly, placed them on the bed in the guest room, and shut the door. That night, Travis knocked. "Hey, we're running low on space in the kitchen. You mind if I move a few things around?" I looked up from my book. "No, Travis. I do mind." He blinked. "I mean, I like the kitchen the way it is." Silence. And then for the first time in months, he didn't have a comeback. The rebellion was never loud. It didn't need to be. Because sometimes the quietest no is the one that rearranges the whole room. It happened over blueberries. Sunday morning, I was rinsing fruit for my oatmeal, nothing more dramatic than that, when Travis walked in, shirtless, yawning like a man who owned the place. He opened the fridge, took the last of the almond milk, and without even looking at me, said, "You should probably start knocking before coming into the kitchen. Just a little privacy, you know." I didn't say anything, not at first. But something in me, something old, quiet, and sharp, cracked. "Excuse me," I asked, voice level. He looked up, lazy, just saying, "It's weird. You sort of hover. I think Melissa feels it too, like the house is getting a bit tight." Tight! I looked around. Same four walls, same floor I'd swept, mopped, and polished for 33 years. The curtains I sewed myself. The tile Henry laid one summer, even though his back was already bad. The corner where Melissa took her first steps. The mark on the doorframe where we measured her height every birthday until she turned 12 and said it was childish. Tight. And here he was suggesting I ask permission to enter my own kitchen. Like I was some distant relative who'd overstayed her welcome. Like I didn't belong. I wiped my hands on my towel, and looked him square in the eye. "You're living in my home, Travis," I said. "You and Melissa both. Rent-free, eating food I pay for. Sitting on furniture I chose. Breathing air conditioned by bills with my name on them." He shifted his weight. The arrogance faltered. "Well, yeah, but... I mean, Melissa said you were okay with it. You offered. I offered space," I said. "Not sovereignty." The silence hung heavy between us. Not tense, just final. Like the echo after a closing door. He shrugged, trying to shake it off. "Okay. Well, I guess we can talk about it later." "No," I said, calm and clear. "We'll talk about it now." He blinked. I didn't mean anything by it. "You never do," I replied. It was true. Men like him rarely mean anything, but they still take up all the air in the room. With their need for comfort, their silent expectations, Their assumption that the world is built around their convenience. And I wasn't angry. I wasn't yelling. I was just done. I stepped aside and let him pass. He went upstairs without another word. I stood there for a long time, one hand on the counter, the other still damp from blueberries. And I asked myself, is this what it means to become invisible? Not because you shrank, but because someone else decided to grow into your space and pretend you were never there. Let me ask you something. Have you ever had to explain to someone that you exist? Not in theory, not in memory, but here now, alive and standing in the middle of your own kitchen. I walked into the living room and turned off the Wi-Fi router, just to see what would happen. 3 minutes later, Travis came down, holding his phone like it had betrayed him. Wi-Fi down, he asked. Must be, I said, not looking up. He stood there like a man waiting for something he couldn't name. I let the silence stretch. Because sometimes silence is the only language they understand. The next morning I printed a letter. Not an email, not a text. A real letter signed, dated, and placed on the kitchen table. It wasn't long. Just 5 lines. Effective 2 weeks from today, this house will no longer accommodate you. You will need to find alternate living arrangements. I will not be discussing this. You are adults. Act like it. I signed it Joanna D. Halloran because sometimes your full name is Armour. I placed it beneath a bowl of oranges. Deliberate. Centered. Then I made myself coffee. Strong, unmeasured in the chipped blue mug I always reach for when I've made up my mind. They found it around 9:30. Melissa read it first. Her hand shook. Is this a joke, she asked. No, I said. It's a boundary. Travis snorted. You can't just kick us out. I'm not kicking, I said. I'm ending an arrangement. He opened his mouth again, but I raised my hand. This isn't a discussion. You have your salaries, your cars, your options, and frankly, you've overstayed your welcome. Where are we supposed to go? Melissa asked, voice small. Wherever people your age usually go when they're not living off a widow's retirement. She looked wounded, like I'd betrayed something sacred. And maybe I had. Maybe I'd betrayed the script where I played the grateful mother, the silent provider, the woman who never needed space because she didn't matter enough to take up any. I didn't cry. Not even when Melissa stormed off and slammed the bedroom door. Not even when Travis muttered something about ungrateful old women and called someone on his phone. I just stood by the window and watched a blue jay land on the fence. It pecked twice, then flew away. That evening, I opened my closet. I took out the small suitcase I hadn't used since Henry's memorial, the one with the green tag still tied to the handle. And I packed. Not to leave, but to remind myself that I could. 2 dresses, 1 book, a photo of me and Henry laughing in a parking lot because we'd both worn polka dots by accident. I placed the suitcase near the front door, not as a threat, as a declaration. Sometimes the most radical thing an old woman can do is say, "This is my house, and I still choose me." They didn't speak to me for 2 days. That was fine. The house was quiet, not tense, just cleared, like fog lifting after a long night. And I thought to myself, this is what reclaiming looks like. Not drama, not revenge, just oxygen. I didn't wait for them to pack. I left first, not out of anger, but because I needed to breathe before their resentment poisoned the last corners of my peace. I booked 3 nights at a little bed and breakfast in Port Townsend. The kind with creaky floors and fresh scones and no flat-screen TVs. It rained the first evening. Not a violent rain, just soft, insistent. The kind that seeps into your shoulders and rinses things clean. Grief, guilt, even muscle memory. I sat by the window with a cup of tea and thought, this is what stillness feels like when it isn't forced. I didn't call Melissa. I didn't check the cameras. I didn't ask if they'd left. I watched a seagull land on the deck railing and stay for nearly 20 minutes. Just standing there, no flapping, no noise. Present. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you were allowed to just exist without explaining your presence to anyone? On the second morning, I walked down to the docks. Bought a pair of wool gloves from a vendor who made them by hand. We talked about crab season, about how the air changes right before snow, like the sky itself draws a breath. No one knew me there. No one expected anything. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel reduced to a role. Not a mother. Not a grandmother, not a keeper of the fridge or a keeper of the peace. Just Joanna. That afternoon, I sat in the tiny library on Taylor Street, the one Henry used to love for its leather chairs and crooked shelves. I found a copy of The Secret Garden. I hadn't read it in 50 years. I cried on page 17, not because of the story, but because I remembered reading it out loud to Melissa, her legs curled under her hair, still damp from the bath. And I wondered, not with bitterness, just stillness, when she stopped seeing me as a person with feelings and started seeing me as a service. I didn't have the answer. Maybe I didn't need it. That night, I opened my notebook. The brown leather one I'd stopped using years ago. I wrote, I don't want to live bitter, but I won't live erased. If kindness isn't returned, at least let dignity remain. When I returned home, they were gone. The house felt lighter, not empty, just mine again. On the table, they had left a note. No apology. Just, thanks for the time. Sorry it didn't work out. There was no signature. I didn't need one. I folded the note once, twice, and placed it in the back of my recipe box between Henry's cornbread and Melissa's first banana bread. Not to forget it, but to file it away, like all the other bittersweet things we carry and no longer have to hold in both hands. I made tea. Chamomile. With honey. I opened the windows, even though it was cold. Let the air flow through every room, even the guest room, which now smelled only faintly of beard oil and entitlement. I stripped the sheets from their bed, not with anger, but with finality. I folded them, pressed them into the laundry basket, and carried it out to the garage. Later, I donated them to a shelter downtown, along with the throw pillows Melissa insisted were better suited to their style, and the chrome lamp Travis brought in that never felt like it belonged. I lit a candle. Not for romance, for rebirth. Then I opened the filing cabinet and took out the will. The one Melissa had drafted all legal language and bullet points, names, percentages, contingency clauses. I read every line not for sentiment, but with clarity. And then I fed it one page at a time into the shredder. I didn't write a new one, not yet. I'd think about that later. And if I never changed my mind, maybe everything would go to the community center, or the scholarship fund, or the sea. Because for the first time in decades, my legacy would be mine to decide. The next morning, I went to the farmer's market alone. I bought tulips, orange ones, wild and bright, I bought jam from a woman with silver braids and a laugh that shook the table. We talked about nothing and everything. She said, "Come back next week and I'll save you the fig preserves." I said, "I think I will." Back home, I moved my mother's ring from the drawer to my finger. I changed the bedding floral, loud, unapologetic. I painted the mailbox yellow, a joyful, defiant yellow. And when the neighbor girl passed by, the one who always smiled but never stopped long, I invited her in for hot cocoa. She came. We didn't talk much. She drew pictures at the table while I peeled apples for a pie. Before she left, she hugged me. Not because I gave her anything, just because I was there. And for a moment, I thought, this is all I ever wanted. Not to be revered, not to be obeyed, just seen. That night, I stood in the doorway of my own kitchen, same tile, same light. But everything had changed, because I had. I poured myself a glass of water, turned off the light, and whispered, "Welcome home." Then I went to bed, not afraid of the quiet, but grateful for it. Because in that silence, I heard the strongest thing of all. My own voice. If my story reminded you of someone, maybe even yourself, don't scroll away in silence. Leave a comment below. Have you ever had to take your home, your peace, or your dignity back one quiet choice at a time? And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who still believes that growing older means fading away. Because here at Eleanor Speaks, we know the truth. You don't disappear with age. You become unmistakably yourself.